In today's workshop, I'll be going over some of the very brief history of cryptography. So let me just go back to the slides. Yep, so as I said, a bit on an introduction to cryptography, a little bit of history, but most importantly, the applications and some hands-on problems. So as I said at the start of this, we will be using Try Hack Me tonight. So if you don't have an account, please do so. It's just chuck your email account in and it's all free, but they do have premium versions, but we'll just be using the free ones today. If you haven't used it before, don't worry, very beginner friendly. We'll show you how to use it exactly. So the first thing is, what exactly is cryptography? Because it's also often used interchangeably with other terms like encryption, which is not really correct, because cryptography is the art of making something hard to read. So turning something from an easily readable plain text message into something that's not so human readable. So we used to have handwritten ciphers. So some of you may have heard of very famous ciphers like the Caesar cipher, for example. That's a very famous handwritten one. But nowadays, thanks to the advent of modern computers, which can perform, thousands of calculations in the blink of an eye, we're able to use much more advanced and difficult to crack encryption techniques. However, that doesn't mean they're unbreakable, as you guys will learn today. Cryptography is also a very popular category of capture the flag challenges. So anyone who's done capture the flag challenges before will know that there's often a large section of cryptography challenges, whether that's breaking a small Caesar cipher, going to more advanced things like using blockchain to decrypt certain transactions. So early cryptography, it started with something called the cytail, basically a long length of wood. You wrap some leather around it and you engrave the letters, as you can see in the corner here. And then you only would be able to read it if you had the right wrap and the right length of stick, because otherwise it would look like a roll of gibberish. Two more famous ciphers you may have heard of is the Balasso cipher and the Vineger cipher, named after two very famous early pioneers. So Balasso even wrote one of the first treatises on ciphers and how to break it. And he invented many techniques like digraph and trigraph analysis, which basically look at common pairings of certain letters. So you guys will know that, for example, TH and CH are very common letter pairs in English, and so we can use that knowledge to help break some of the ciphers. However, we started moving away from these handwritten ciphers, substitution ciphers, A becomes Z kind of thing, when we had the outbreak of war. So with telecommunications, like through the telegram, having really secure encrypted ciphers that were also quick to do became really important. So a lot of you guys no doubt will have heard of the Enigma machine, where you press the key and rotors would rotate and a different key would light up. But every time you press that key, a different letter will light up. And it was meant to be very difficult to crack until a team at Bletchley Park, including the very famous Alan Turing, were able to crack one variant of the Enigma code called the naval Enigma code. The other thing that became very popular in war that we still use today are one-time pads, but we don't use them as much today. Basically, it's a one-time, you have a set of keywords and then you have a set of encrypted variants of them, and you use that to communicate. And because there's only one word for one specific secret, it became very hard to reverse because they couldn't just brute force through every single word possible, which we can now do today. So, as I said before, computers have made cryptography a lot faster. No longer do we have to hand calculate all the different variations or try and figure out what letter this stands for. We can just plug into a computer and that can run the analysis for us. This meant that we could move beyond those simple ciphers into more complicated ones, as I meant before, and we can break even some of the older ones. There's an excellent computer file video on breaking Enigma with modern day computers and how it shows how much cryptography has evolved. I really recommend that video. And as part of that development of cryptography, we've also developed different types of cryptography for different things. So earlier, Omri mentioned something called hash cracking. Do any of you know what hashes are? So password hashing, for example. Anyone know? Yes? Yeah, that's basically it. It's a secure way of storing passwords. So instead of just, having your username here and then the password in plain text like user and password, you would instead write something like a function which would take in the word password, scramble it up, put some random characters in there, perform some mathematical operation, which we call a hash, and then it would come out with something else. And therefore, it would be, in theory, harder to read that password. So even if the hackers managed to get into the database and find your secret data, if they couldn't crack the hash, it was useless to them. However, as we will see today, a lot of the hashes used, or the old hash techniques, are now outdated. So things like MD5 and SHA-1 are no longer cryptographically secure. We can basically just chuck them into a website and there's your password. And there was a very famous company called RockU who had a massive password leak. And it was discovered that all of their passwords were stored in the clear. they didn't hash any of their passwords. And so when they got hacked, basically hackers could immediately just log in as random users because they'd have the username and the password in the clear. And in fact, for those of you who may already know about the RockU text file in Kali, instead of just letting all those passwords, disappear, they have taken that word list and compiled it into a big text file that's by default included in all Kali distros. And it allows you to brute force crack some of the most common passwords by using that text, and it's called rocky.txt because that's the company that got hacked. And if you do like laughing at people's stupidity, you can look at the RockU and see that some of the top passwords include password, Carlos, and unicorn. It's a great time. Anyway, don't use single words for your passwords, please. Use a password manager or something else. Anyway, as I was saying before, different variants of cryptography. So the one I mentioned there was hash functions, so used to store passwords. But another really important one is called symmetric key cryptography. It's called symmetric key because both parties, so in encryption, we tend to call it Alice and Bob, will have access to the same key. And you can see some of the more famous ones as AES and DES. DES is now outdated. It's technically insecure, and so we try to use AES when we can. There's the block ciphers, which encrypt large blocks of traffic. So whenever you need to encrypt something in bulk, you would use that one. And there's also stream ciphers like RC4 and Charter. They've got great names. And so again, you would use these when you have a large amount of encryption. So not for parsers, which is just repeated individual strings, but for like internet traffic, for example. Another one that's sort of linked to that is public key / asymmetric cryptography. So this is where you have things like the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Have people heard of that before? People talk about in terms of paint and mixing colors and whatnot, but it's basically a way that allows you to securely send two different parties' passwords over a public connection and still have that be secure. A lot of cryptography actually relies on the idea that primes are really hard to factorize. So if I said, what's 3 times 2, okay, that's a really bad example, a really small number, it's much easier to factorize than if I told you to factorize 6 and if I told you to factorize 23. Because as you know, primes, they'll only have themselves in 1. And so it takes many more calculations to try and figure out what the first 2 primes were that you started with. So that's how that works. And so if anyone does web, you'll know that TLS uses asymmetric cryptography to secure session keys. And that's how you start a secure transmission between a server and a client. Hash functions we already talked about. And the other thing I was going to mention very quickly is cryptanalysis. So basically, the study of ways to break encryption. So looking at things like digraph and trigraph analysis. In some cases, it might just be as simple as how many times does this character appear in this sentence? Because as I'm sure many of you know, E is overwhelmingly the most common character in English. And so if you have a substitution cipher and you see a lot of Ds, for example, you probably can guess that that's an E. But unfortunately less useful when it comes to cracking modern day ciphers. So here is a list of some of the most commonly used cryptography tools. We have Hashcat and Hash ID, and a hash identifier. Hash ID and hash identifier are both used to identify hashes. So basically, you can plug in a hash that you stole from some shady database, and it can spit out what kind of hash it is. So it might say, this is MD5, this is a SHA hash, and then you can use that to then go to tools like Hashcat, JohnTheRipper, and sometimes OpenSSL3 to then crack that hash and reveal the plaintext. So you can use that to log in as someone else. Hydra, which is another tool that we'll be using tonight, is also used to crack like username and password combinations. So basically you say, I've got this username here and I want to attack this particular login portal, go. And you just let it run and it will go through all the different passwords until it gets a successful hit. There's also a couple of web tools which we'll be using, particularly CrackStation. That's a really good one. What it does is it's stored a list of known hashes. So instead of having to brute force all the possibilities every single time, it has like a table and it will compare your one with every single one until it finds the correct one. So if you have a really common password, CrackStation can sometimes be faster than using something like Hash ID or JohnTheRipper, which can sometimes use a lot of memory or CPU, as the case may be, on your machine. Hash Analyzer is also another hash identification tool. That's a web-based one, and that can also be quite useful as well. So now it's your turn to go break into some passwords that you definitely obtained legally. Here's tonight's challenge list. So on Try Hack Me, we'll be using Hydra and Crack the Hash. And for those who have either already done those boxes and know a lot about it, yes, I'm looking at you. If you've already done a lot of it, I have listed some other cryptography challenges that you may like to try. So Crack the Hash level 2 is also on Try Hack Me. It is a more advanced hash cracking exercise. it will probably fry your CPU. But anyway, if you don't feel like doing hashing and you want to try some other cryptography challenges, there's also some from Pico CTF, another CTF platform, including Summer Prime's Bootleg RSA and AES ABC. But if you want to go ahead and do the more advanced challenges, go ahead. Has everyone managed to find this challenge page? Put your hand up if you don't have this challenge page up and you need help. All good? That's good. So they have a video walkthrough over here, but the more important thing is this what is Hydra introduction. If you don't have Hydra installed in your Kali, you can have a look at it here. And when you're ready, you can join the room. So I'm going to give you guys, let's say, 15 minutes to try and start the Hydra room. So there's 2 tasks in this one. Firstly, you have to retrieve their, I think it's their online account username and ID, and then you have to retrieve their SSH username and ID. So I'll let you guys have about 15, 20 minutes to try and do the first room, and then I'll do a walkthrough of it. So don't worry if you don't manage to get a solution in time. If you have any troubles, put your hands up. We'll come around and help you. Okay, so for those of you who haven't been able to find the password for task 1, what the task tells us to do is to brute force Molly's password. So if you went to the link, so 10.10. Whatever yours is, mine is 6747, I think. And you'll be greeted with a login page. It's very standard, login, username, password. So we're going to use the following Hydra command to try and crack the password. So I'll break it down for you. Firstly, we want to be using Hydra, the name of our program. The -L denotes the username. So the username that we're targeting is Molly. The -P after that is telling us that we're going to be using the passwords from this file. Again, if you have got your own Kali distro, your path might look a little bit different, but this is the default one. Then we're going to say our target IP is whatever the one HackTheBox gave you, 10.10.something. That's what it should look like. After that, we have to specify what type of page we're attacking. So Try Hack Me actually told us that we're looking for a HTTP post form. For those of you who do web development or have done any kind of stuff with that, yeah, that's great, but I have not done enough web. Anyway, the next thing we're specifying is the fields. So the login field, the username field, and the incorrect field. So as we know, as the website told us, the login page is at /login. So specify that first. Then we have the username field and the password field. And we say that if you get incorrect in your response, you've done it wrong, Hydra, try again. Then we add -F at the end, which means terminate once you get something that works. So I run this and I give it maybe 30 seconds.
There's probably an easier way to do it.
An easier way. This is the way that I have used. If you can think of a nicer solution, 10 out of 10. I approve. Put it on LinkedIn or something. Anyway, so now that we can see that Hydra has found us a password, log in Molly, password, sunshine. So with that information, we can go back into, where was it? We can go here. We can open the Hydra challenge and we can put in Molly, password, sunshine. And then behold the password. So now we can just copy this in. I feel like this is a reference to something that I don't understand. If you understand it, please tell me. And now we can put it in here, submit. Correct answer. Flag 1 done. Has everyone who didn't do it got that now? We all happy? Excellent, you're all hackers now. So for the second one, this time instead of trying to crack a web username, we want to crack an SSH password. So very conveniently, they actually gave us almost the whole syntax for this particular attack, which is, if Carly would wake up, please, which is going to be Hydra-L. Again, we're specifying the username and the password at USR share word lists rocky. I can't type today. Word lists rock ryu.txt at, I don't want to autofill because it's going to go to the other one. Because this time we're not attacking an HTTP post form. Instead, we're looking at SSH. So we specify our target IP, and this time we just add SSH. And now, yes, complain about the number of threads I'm running. We let it run. It's going to think, crack some maths. Don't worry if you can't memorize the commands. I'll go through and help everyone at the end. And it has spat out another password, which is butterfly. So now we can simply log in. So Molly at 10.10.67.47, I think. Yes, I want to connect to a suspicious website. Now we type in the password, which is BUTTERFLY, butterfly. And now we're in the system. So for those of you who don't know how to use Linux, we're going to type ls to list all the files in the home directory. And then we type cat, the name of the file we want to open, and then open that. And here is our flag, thus solving the second task. By the way, so if we go crack the hash, come on, this one. The one with the funny, I don't know, what is that? Octopus, squid, whatever, that one. If you have already worked with Hashcat and JohnTheRipper and you feel like something more of a challenge, I recommend crack the hash level 2. It will probably fry your CPU/GPU, so have fun. But if you haven't, no worries, we're going to be doing this room. So in this room, we're given a series of hashes. So we can see there's actually 2 levels. There's level 1 and level 2. All you got to do this one is convert the hash into a readable password. And we can all laugh at people's dumb passwords now. So the way you do these challenges is more or less the same. So I'm going to show you how to do the first one, and then I'll let you guys have 15, 20 minutes to see how many you can go through on your own. So for the first, I think the first 5 of them, you can all solve with just CrackStation. You don't need to use Hashcat. You don't need to use JohnTheRipper. It's a lot faster that way, and it saves you more headaches. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this first hash. Let's copy selection. And now we're going to go to hash identifier. Hash type identifier. I think it's the first one that comes up. Submit and identify. We simply copy it in and it'll spit it out for you. This one is MD5. So the more hash cracking you do, the more you'll be able to look at something and go, that's an MD5. But for now, we're just going to use hash identifier tools. I'll also show you how to do this on the command line if you prefer doing it that. But for now, online tools. We're then going to go to CrackStation, online password hash cracking. It looks like a website from the 80s. Thank you. That's wonderful. CrackStation. If CrackStation doesn't work, we'll do it with Hashcat. What? Wonderful. If it is blocked, we shall revert to doing this old school. In that case, we are going to, if CrackStation is blocked on Monash Wi-Fi, mutter something about operational integrity, probably. We'll instead go to our Kali console. If your attack box has run out, you'll just have to watch along for now. We're going to create a new file called hash.txt and paste in our hash. Paste clipboard. We want to make sure there's no extra spaces, lines, anything at all. Just our plain hash. Save, exit. Now, like I said, you can do this with either Hashcat or JohnTheRipper. Personally, I prefer Hashcat. Why? Syntax is slightly easier. So to use Hashcat, we're going to go Hashcat and specify the mode. So the way Hashcat works is it has a series of modes. So if we go Hashcat modes, I think this is also linked on the Try Hack Me page. So if you look at Hashcat, really? How kind. Anyway, well, if Monash wants to be like this, I'm gonna stuff them all. If you want to identify the mode for Hashcat and you don't know how to get the hash, well, firstly, okay, for this particular one, I can tell you what the answer is. The answer is Hashcat-M0 for MD5. Okay, it's already got the hash here because I've done this one before. We can say hash.txt, that's the name of the file we made. You can also just copy the hash straight in. Hash.txt, and back to our favorite user, share, word lists, rocku.txt, and we let it run. That gives us our password. Like I said, we can now laugh at everyone. This password was easy. So now we go back into here, back into the challenge, this one. And actually, try hack me is very nice because I tell you exactly how long the password is. So if you want to save time, you can just take a truncated version of Rocky that only has things of however long this is. Now you can go in here, type easy, done. 1 hash cracked, several more to go. Now, I did say I will show you how to crack the other hash identifier. So if I remember correctly, we can use hash ID -m, and then we can put in a hash. And hash, if we use that, so hash ID is very nice because the -m tells you to put out the Hashcat mode as well as the actual hash. So in this case, it'll say this particular hash, which is the next one down for your information. If we add -m, it could say it can be any one of these, which is Hashcat mode 100. So yes, you will have to go through all the different Hashcat modes and try them. I will tell you which ones they are if you spend too long on it. I will warn you that the very last one for this, the part 1, it's not in RockU. So unless you have another word list or you have a website, I would have used CrackStation, but it's apparently blocked, so you might have to do that one at home. But feel free to go ahead and crack as many hashes as you can, and I will go through the solutions at about 7:45.